everyone, and welcome to the Changemakers podcast, where we chat with interesting and engaging individuals here and far about change, making change, living change in their own lives, how they've experienced unimaginable change, and innovative ways people uplift the lives of others. We chat about triumphs over tragedies, mindset matters, and how we live out our life's purpose inspirationally. So please join us to be inspired and empowered to be the change you want to see in this world. You know, we can all be change makers in our lives. Here's to the change you're about to bring forth. And here we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episodes of the Changemakers podcast, Changemakers podcast. Today, we are welcoming an amazing woman out on the West Coast in the USA, Chief Civility Officer of and Master Juggler, Legal Training Ninja, President of TrainXtra, Sejal Thakker. So Sejal, I'm so excited to welcome you today to our program, Changemakers, where we discuss how you and others can change your lives and have change in the lives of others.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I am humbled and excited to be here today.
So let's just jump right in, shall we? In the middle of this pandemic, here we are in the fall of 2020. We are all doing the best that we can and in our own respective, what I call genius zones. And so I would love for you to share, Sejal, a little bit with our listeners about yourself and a few insights into your professional journey.
Sure. So right now, I'm doing a lot on my plate, but I'm going to start with the first thing that comes to, I think what's most dearest to my heart is, I started a company in 2017 called TrainXtra, and it's really based around helping organizations create cultures of civility. And so just to give you a little bit of background, I started practicing employment law in California since about 2003. And ever since I was licensed, I've been representing managers and leaders, litigating cases up until about 8 years ago, specifically focusing in on harassment and discrimination. And as I was doing that, several things became clear to me. One was that I realized that I'm more of a conflict resolution gal than a litigator. So I was conflicted because I'd be talking to leaders, and if I really felt that there was injustice or something should have been done differently, I found myself educating the leaders on what they should have done differently or how that situation could have been handled differently, rather than let's just win the case. So, and then I felt that if the employee had been wronged, I wanted to try to do something I could to help them, to make up for the wrong. So I knew that that wasn't the right fit, but I love being a lawyer. And so I continued doing it. And what happened along the way is that I got to see organizations from a different lens. Aside from just a legal perspective, I was also doing a lot of workplace investigations. So I got to see organizations from the nuts and bolts perspective of how they were doing their business and where they were spending their money and what they were focusing on. And in this process, I learned a lot about how things could be done differently to really help organizations. And from my perspective, it's really, we need to focus on the culture of the organization itself, which is made up of its people. And so when I had my son about 8 years ago, I decided, I really want to, well, first of all, I wanted to be at home with him and be a stay-at-home mom, but I had to work. So I was lucky enough to get some work along the way where I started doing a lot of teaching and training, and realized, wow, I have a strong passion for training, and it seemed to work because of the experience that I've gained throughout my career, where I do a lot of storytelling in my trainings. And so using those stories to support what I was talking about and why I felt that really civility needs to be where the focus needs to be in organizations, I just went for it. Then 3 years ago, I said, you know what? Something happened. You hit certain age, and I'm not going to say my age, but it happened. And literally a week later, I gave my notice I was working at UCSF Medical Center as a senior complaint resolution officer there. And I said, you know what? It's now or never, just go for it. And so luckily, knock on wood, I'm still standing and I made it through the pandemic in one piece and I'm still here. So that's a little bit of what I'm doing right now, Kimberly.
Well, it's fascinating to me. I've worked with so many women lawyers over several decades. Um, when they go into the practice of law, there's one perspective, and then maybe, I don't know, 2 to 5 years, you get your feet wet and kind of get a handle on what the situation is, what you know, what you don't know, what the reality is, which may be different than what law school taught you it would be. And then people pivot on. And I love to see how women, lawyers in particular, but women professionals, how they take their genius zone and what they thought they were going to do, and they pivot and they still embrace their magnificence, but not as a practicing lawyer.
Yeah, and I know so many women that have done that, where they've taken a lot of the skills, but utilized it outside of the law or very closely connected to it to really make a difference. I mean, especially right now, I'm talking to so many change makers, that are out there, thought leaders that have legal backgrounds, but they're using it in different ways. And it's just beautiful to see, that we're sort of creating our own path.
Oh my gosh, you're singing my song now, my friend. Charting the whole premise of Changemakers, as you know, is we help equip and empower women to create the careers of their dreams by charting their own course, which is really very intentional and a purpose-filled mission. So, but enough about me for now. But share with us, how has this journey in helping others a little bit differently than what you started out as, in this way, how has it impacted you and your life?
So let me go a little bit further back into my journey. I think that really sort of sets the stage for a lot of what I'm doing right now. So, Kimberly, as I grew up in a small suburb of Chicago called Elmwood Park. And my parents were immigrants from India that moved there. They moved into Chicago, not in that town, but in Chicago in 1974. And then I was born here in Chicago. So, we were the only, when I started going into elementary school and up until high school, we were the only Indian family in this all Italian neighborhood. And this is, we're talking, late 70s, early 80s, all the way up to mid 80s. So it was a different time. And, but, I went through a lot of bullying, a lot of harassment and discrimination as growing up. And, it was close to home. I mean, people would ridicule me because of the color of my skin. They would make fun of my parents' accent. My parents owned a convenience store that was right across from our elementary school, where the kids would go in there and see my parents. And then, they were different and they had the accent. They were the typical immigrant family, so still barely spoke English when we first moved here. So growing up and dealing with all of that, and as I got older, I started acting out to defend myself. And there was a lot of like anger that I noticed was coming out in me. And I remembered one day when I came home, there was actually eggs TPing our house and there was toilet paper on our house. And it wasn't because of Halloween or anything like that. It was, hateful. And at this point, I realized that, by this point, I had gotten suspended from school a couple of times. I was fighting back and acting out and rebelling. And I remember just having this conversation in my head, where it was like, I'm going down a path right now and I have a decision to make. If I continue going that way, I don't know where I'm going to end up. And I knew I didn't want that. So I made a choice that I wasn't going to let the bullying and harassment of that take me down a negative path, that I was going to use that experience to help other people see, because these were kids at the time, and so look, I don't, at the time I was upset by it, but when I look back on it now, I don't blame those kids. I mean, they were upbringing of their own environments, of their family environments, and, and all of that other stuff. And so I made a decision back early, eighth or ninth, when I was 8 or 9, where I was like, I'm not going to be a hater. I'm not going to hate other people. That's not who naturally I was. And so I made a conscious, deliberate effort to engage in different cultures, to learn about other cultures, to, have friends of different cultures, consciously being more inclusive in what I was doing. So that was always sort of a fiber of me as I went through law school. I always had that social justice aspect that I knew I wanted to do something about. And so when I started employment law, it was a beautiful marrying of the two, because like I said, I focused in on cases specifically about discrimination and harassment, except the tables were turned. Now I was defending people that were accused of harassment and discrimination. So in the process, I had to do a lot of internal work to be able to make sure that I was fair and helping these folks, and doing my job to best represent them. But like I said, educating is really where my passion was. And this came clear over and over again throughout my career. And now I get to actually talk to people. So some of the training that I'm doing is a lot around civility in the workplace, because that's really what I think is a part of a huge, you have to have a holistic solution about how you're going to create civility in the organizations. I do a couple different aspects of it. I work on the training piece primarily. That's what I'm doing the most of. But I also help with investigations and policies and counseling management on sound business practices, right? So I do some of those other elements as well. But, another topic that I'm really doing a lot of talking and training on is tying back to my childhood, is on this piece of unconscious bias and microaggressions, and how that impacts us in the workplace, but just in life in general, because I couldn't believe it that, they don't even focus on this at all. There wasn't a single class that I remembered in law school dealing with that topic, and when I started to finally learn about it, I was like, this is an area that really needs more attention. People really need to understand that we all have these unconscious beliefs, but we need to do something about it and take accountability for what our own lenses that we're seeing the world through, and how that's not going to match up with everybody else. And so I just think it's such a blessing for me to be able to do the work that I'm doing, to really help people, learn how to unlearn some of these blind spots that they might have that are interfering with their decisions and their relationships in their lives. And so it's something I'm, obviously you can tell, super passionate about.
A little passionate there, I'd say, Sejal. No, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I mean, as you and I have discussed previously, I've worked in male-dominated professions all my career, and I could certainly fill a book of stories where I have been, even as a white female, at the receiving end of bullying. I would just say that would probably be the kindest word, and likely, oh, definitely discrimination. So, this is just something. I mean, and you talk with folks who maybe have come through the workplaces, say, maybe they were halfway through in the 50s, or I'm sorry, in the 70s, and maybe they retired, or in the early 2000s, and so they went through their whole careers with the treatment and the abuse and the lack of civility, to be normal place. I mean, I know in the legal services world, and I'm sure you at least saw it when you were inside private law firms, that it's not really the exception, but sometimes the rule, and of being of the verbal abuse and the unfair treatment of, I won't say just for women, but I mean, it seems like they have a special taste for mistreating women lawyers, perceptions of character strength or whatever. But it makes my heart sing to hear you with such passion to bring about positive change in these types of environments that perhaps the folks like our daughters or our, the younger generations maybe will not have to move through their work journeys, thinking that this is normal and accepted, which is really, I mean, I think about a bouncing ball or a sponge ball in a pool that men, for whatever reason, there's lots of speculation, they feel like they had to put other people down in order to feel positive about themselves or to assert their power, and there's all kinds of psychological profiling that one could do about all that. But nonetheless, the damage is real. I mean, the you can't see it, but it's real. So I love that this is, that this is your professional journey. And you've mentioned employee empowerment. So I'm just curious, what is your view on what this looks like and how employees, particularly women professionals, can leverage their power in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, look, a large part of sort of my training was, look, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they came out with this report in 2016. And what they said was, look, the way that employers have been working on, getting rid of the harassment, like what you talked about, these behaviors that have become normalized over time rather than being dealt with. So there's, all this stuff that's going on, and a lot of organizations are paying a lot of money on training and other things to try to prevent it, but it was still continuing. And so EEOC, they came out with a report and they said, look, you're doing it wrong. You need to focus on training around general concepts of civility as being sort of the focus rather than claim prevention or defense. And the second part of that goes to your question, which is that you have to do more of the bystander intervention training, meaning that employees need to be empowered to lead when it comes to maintaining civility or a culture of where people feel like they're treating with dignity and respect. So empowerment is really about, what I talk about is making employees be a part of the solution. So what do we all want when we go to work? We want to be valued. We want to be heard. We want to know that our organization is giving us some freedom to make decisions about our workplace, and that we can speak up about things if there's something going on that, regardless of the intention of the person, whether they intended to harm us or not, or whether it was coming from an unintentional place. Maybe it was coming from a bias, an unconscious bias. Regardless of that, if it's violating one of our boundaries, then we should be empowered to be able to speak up about that and know what to do and say in those situations. The issue is, in a lot of these organizations, they're not empowering their employees. In fact, it's almost the opposite. They're getting them to shut up by paying them off and saying, don't talk about it with anybody else, right? So we've seen some legal changes in that area that have said, no, you can't have employees not talk about certain issues. For example, if you've been sexually harassed, you can't tell women to shut up and we're going to give you some money, and now you can't ever talk about what the facts were. So meanwhile, the person that was doing it usually gets away with it, continues doing it, and then the women or anybody who's in that situation isn't allowed to talk about it. So I go about it the exact opposite, is, look, you need to help your employees understand that they are empowered to lead, what that means, and exactly what they do in those situations if they arise. And then when they do complain or they do bring it to the attention, that you're going to handle it seriously. So let's make sure you've got your investigation team, your policies, all of this stuff in place, so that you want women and men and whoever's in your organization to bring these concerns to you, rather than go hire an attorney and then you pay a lot more later. Let's be proactive about it, right? So, sorry, that's how I kind of look at empowering employees. And I think as far as what each one of us can do, I think we just really have to all learn how to intervene, because bystanders really should be the people that are addressing these situations. I mean, it'd be great, a lot of us are resilient and some of us would speak up, but a lot of us won't, because for a lot of different reasons. one, we fear retaliation, or two, we're afraid that nobody will believe us, or they're going to judge us differently. There's 100 different reasons why people don't speak up. So therefore, the bystanders have to be the ones that are getting involved, and then they need to know what to say and how to respond, right? So every single person needs to be a part of the solution, and there has to be trust, within the organizations. And the only way that happens is if you empower your employees to be part of that solution.
Yes, 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 and yes. I couldn't agree more. I I pray that this work, just goes like a wildfire through organizations, because it's so desperately needed. It impacts, as you say, so many different aspects of employees' life, leadership life, and retention, recruitment. It really I mean, I'm sure there's studies that show that you can put a dollar figure on when employees and your team is involved, rather versus when they're not involved and encouraged. If you see something, to say something.
Well, I mean, look, I could just throw off one statistic, just that I tell everybody is like, look, do the work now. I mean, SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resource Managers, came out with a study where they said over 5 years, okay, and this is just one little piece of that pie that I'm going to tell you right now. They said they looked at a lot of different organizations over a span of 5 years, and they said that employee turnover caused by toxic cultures cost employers more than $223 billion over 5 years. That's just talking about just employee turnover. That's not even addressing the morale issues, whether productivity is where it should be or not, the bottom line, all of that. And I'm talking 223 billion. So that's just, that just gives you an idea of really why the focus has to be proactive and why you really want to be addressing. I mean, I say this is, I have a huge passion just because of what I've gone through in my life and what I've seen as an attorney and an investigator. But just by observing people and learning to watch people throughout my life, because I've had to assimilate. It's like at home, I was like, okay, now I have to put on the Indian outfit and behave like I'm from India and fall into those culture and traditions. And then on the outside, I'm American and I'm living, sort of this marginal life. But having done that work, I'll tell you, when we look at workplace incivility, it can be really addressed by, we cannot allow these behaviors to become normalized. We cannot. We have to start proactively addressing them when it gets to if you're talking about intentional behaviors, rude or unprofessional. We're talking about, we need people to say, hey, when you didn't say hello to me when I said hello to you, that made me feel uncomfortable. And be able to have that conversation rather than letting it fester and fester and fester. And then it's going to come out like a couple of years later over the wrong thing. So really just learning how to communicate with each other when something is happening, and then knowing that we can have this conversation without being retaliated against, right? And so that's a huge part of it. But also from the unintentional side, employees need to know, like, okay, if somebody engages in a microaggression with somebody else, what do I say? How do I intervene? And a lot of times, people that are engaging in the microaggressions, it comes from an unintentional place. So they don't even know that they're doing it.
Right.
So until you point out the behavior and you put both of those people on notice in a sort of a calm, professional way without judgment, it's not about canceling anybody, but just putting them on notice that, hey, this behavior that you just did, whether you said something or you did something, it's making me feel this way. And I'd prefer you not do that, or and at least be able to go in and have a dialogue to understand what is the other person's perspective. And then we can start, if it really is coming from an unintentional place. Most people, when you tell them, hey, please move back, you're standing too close to me. If it is really unintentional, they're going to stop, right? We're not trying to make each other miserable at work. So they're going to stop. But if it continues, now the organization has to respond. And it's really going back to ground zero and starting over when it comes to setting the culture up and making those sort of here are zero tolerance, but then everything else is a spectrum, and we want to address these issues before they turn into a lawsuit, right? So it really has to go to that extent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm just curious. I wanted to talk about mindset for a minute because it is so crucial and critical in your work, I'm sure. But I'd be curious your viewpoint on what it means to you and your work and how critical it is for a fulfilling and prosperous workplace experience. And what your clients, whether they're leaders or employees, or how they can choose to frame their own life when things may not be looking so bright.
Yeah, these days, I'll tell you, I am all about the growth mindset, always looking to, I think the way I sort of talk about growth mindset is, you're looking at how do I not just prove, I don't forget about proving who I am, but how do I improve who I am, and looking for ways to learn other people's perspectives from a place of, authentic, being curious, and really wanting to understand other people, and how can this benefit us collectively rather than individually on an individual level. Right now, I think it's important, and as I was telling you earlier, when I talk to leaders, I tell them that you have to assess each situation on factual basis, on an individual case by case basis, because everybody is going through something different. But just as far as, moving forward from where we are and wherever that is for everybody, I think you also need to meet people where they're at, and I think a lot of people are saying, we want this done by an organization, and they put out this black box and now they haven't hired X amount of people, so they don't really mean it. And I'm like, that's those kinds of comments and behaviors, I don't think really help us, and it's not the mindset we want to have. I think it's more about what can we do, even if it's something small, to move the needle in that direction.
Yes, I agree. I mean, mindset is everything, regardless of if things are, what I like to say sometimes, whether or not they're lollipops and rainbows or not, right?
Yeah.
How we perceive and respond to that. So this is so wonderful, Sejal. This is one of my most fun questions that I ask on our Changemakers podcast, and that is, if given where you are in your journey right now, and the rearview mirror is such a wonderful reflection of looking back and assessing. If you could give your younger self one piece of professional advice, what would that be?
I would say that when I was younger, when I think about sort of where my life was and how I behaved and reacted to certain situations, I mean, I thought I had it all figured out. I knew I was going to be a lawyer from like around 8 or 9 years old. My dad said to my mom at dinner table that she's going to be an attorney. And so I had it all planned out. Law school, I was going to get through college, get my bachelor, go to law school. And I did a lot of planning for that. I really threw myself into my education because it was a good escape from what I was going through as far as the bullying and stuff goes. And so it was a good outlet for me. And I had this plan. And so I think that having a clear direction of sort of where I wanted to go was a good thing. But I know now, like, I stayed in the law firm world way too much longer than I really wanted to. And I probably should have left a long time ago, because I knew that what I wanted to do, my passion was something different than being in the law firm, but I stayed in it because that was the plan. And so I would tell my younger self that, look, plans can change. It's good to be prepared. It's good to be motivated and have some goals, but sometimes you need to just stop stressing out and just really kind of go with your passion and enjoy the journey on the way. Right.
Mm. Wow, that is so amazing. That is such sage advice. Oh my God, that's wonderful. One of the stories that I love, I don't know if you know Esther Abraham Hicks.
I don't.
Oh, well, we'll have to share that offline. But she is a tremendous spiritual teacher, life teacher. And one of the teachings that I always keep front and center is allowing yourself to let go of the oars of your life and get into the flow of your life. That there is a natural flow for all of us, and stop fighting for something that really you shouldn't be a part of at any one time. It can happen at any part of our lives, early, mid, late, whatever, but to always just be listening. And so what you said there with, we all have a passion and we think we're going to go down one path until that path doesn't work so well for us anymore, but we keep fighting it. But then just to really surrender, right? Let it go. Surrender to the natural flow of your life, which I think is just a beautiful analogy.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what you just said, because it sparked something in me as you were talking. What I've learned in my journey, and I say this jokingly, and you're the first person I'm saying it to on a podcast. So, but I really truly believe that I've spent my whole life learning to this point, and I'm unlearning now for the rest of it, and just relearning different ways of doing things. And a lot of it really boils down to it for me is that I think we have a really hard time taking a leap of faith in ourselves. We really do. We fight it, and it's like, if you've ever achieved like anything in your life, it's going to be hard, and you need to take that big step. And sometimes we're just not ready to take that big step because we don't believe in ourselves and our own abilities. And once, starting my own business was actually never my plan, because my parents owned their own businesses. And so I knew what it meant, and I knew how much work goes into it. And so, but it was the best decision I ever made, because it was a huge step I took, where I took a leap of faith in myself, and I had no one else to count on for where I am, as far as what am I doing. But I see that to people now, and I've actually started telling people, like, you don't know the limit of what you can achieve until you take that leap of faith in yourself. Like, everything else is going to come and go,
Right.
but keep focused and just invest in yourself.
Well, that's exactly right, and it's so challenging for a lot of different reasons. But I've always heard. I mean, I had no aspirations to own a business or to be an entrepreneur, and I worked for other organizations for 23 years before making that step, and it wasn't really one made out of fear. I know a lot of people are immobilized by fear, to which I say everything that we want is on the other side of fear. So really, I think it comes down to courage, and summoning the courage to believe in ourselves, and enjoying the ride, because it's very unpredictable. You don't know what's going to come next. I mean, you might have a sketch of a plan, but that goes to the point that I made earlier, is being willing to go with the flow wherever that may take us. And that often comes with intentionality, but that's another topic for another day. But this is absolutely fascinating. Such wonderful wisdom that you have, Sejal, and I'm so grateful. I wanted to offer if there's anything else that you would like to share with us.
Yeah, no, I just think I really appreciate having this opportunity to be on here. And I think what I will add, and my final thought, I guess I would say, is, look, we've all had to overcome some pretty tough situations. A lot of us are going through some tough stuff right now. And I just want to leave some encouragement for people to kind of remember that these failures are, temporary sort of setbacks, and that you can take whatever pain or whatever you're going through and still keep a positive attitude during this time. Look for opportunities, surround yourself with people that are positive and that can help you propel forward, and try not to get stuck. I mean, if you feel stuck, whether it's in your mind or physically, take the small steps. Don't be afraid to take the small steps, because if you think about just history, there have been other times in history where people have gone through some stuff that I'm sure they felt like there's no way out of this, and it'll move as long as we all keep moving together.
Yes. A business coach of mine has a wonderful saying that I say often to my clients and others, and that is, you cannot be in the state of fear when you are in the state of action. So
Mm.
So we must all pray and move our feet.
That's right. I
You know?
love that saying. I love that saying. And I can just tell you that's been my I've been practicing gratitude as
Yes,
that's the one step that I always turn to when I don't know how far I can move or where I can go. I turn to that step and I say, that's my default. Start making a list. Just start counting. One, I'm grateful for this. Two, I'm grateful for this. And keep counting. Under no circumstances do you stop. Because at some point, whether you get to 30 or 50 or maybe even 100, the chemicals in your brain will start to change and you'll start feeling better. And so if you can't take any other steps, take that step and then you'll be able to figure it out.
absolutely. So, one of my business coaches, and I use this in my business, the statement every day on the top of my journal is, I am so happy and grateful that. And I
Mm,
just do a bam, bam, boom, 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 that I am here. Thank you for
yeah.
my life. Thank you for my eyes. Thank you for my health. Thank you for my home. Thank you for my family. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it does. There is a brain change when we stay in the state of gratitude.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Sejal. I wanted to, one last thing is to give our listeners a way to connect with you directly, and all of your uplifting wisdom and the services that you provide that every single organization could greatly benefit from. So I want to make sure that we make that connection.
Sure. So there's two good ways. I would say, look, if you're on LinkedIn, that's the only social media platform I'm on. Connect with me or just follow me. I really, I say this in every podcast because it's important, is that I love to share information with people and good information. There's so much stuff out there right now. You don't know what's good for you, what's truthful or what's not. And if it's around the area of civility and unconscious bias, I look for this information so that I can share it. And so I'm always putting out tools and guidelines and other things that might be helpful resources. So LinkedIn. And then the other place you can go to is my website, which is www.TrainXtra, and that's TrainXtra.com.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much, my friend, for joining us today. And to our audience, thank you for sticking around and listening to this scintillating conversation. It's my prayer that it's been uplifting and engaging for you. And until next time, as I always say, it's never too early to be the change that you want to see in the world. Thank you and God bless.